Bonjour, hello everyone, and welcome back to the CSLA OALA National Congress. I hope you enjoyed your virtual field trips yesterday. Not too much sun, not too many mosquito bites, and hopefully no blisters from those new shoes. Today, I want to add my welcome to our newest members of the College of Fellows. I think it's important to note to our younger CSLA members that if you find time in your brilliant career to come for service to the profession, the community, and to the environment, you too can become a fellow. We have a full day for you today, starting with our amazing opening keynote speaker, Martha Schwartz. Your technical program will start right after the keynote, and then later at the end of the day, we have some open forum discussion threads. Please take the time to visit our virtual trade show and see the innovation our suppliers are bringing to the marketplace. And stick around at the end of the day to say hello to old friends and perhaps make some new ones. Have fun.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Jane Welsh, past president of the OALA and the current chair of the CSLA Committee on Climate Adaptation, an amazing group of landscape architects from across Canada who helped shape Congress in 2021. It's an absolute delight for me to introduce our keynote speaker today. I have to confess that I have been a fan since I was first introduced to Martha Schwartz, landscape architect and artist, when I was a student at Guelph and her bagel garden was on the cover of Landscape Architecture magazine. And excited when she designed a high-profile outdoor space in Toronto's Yorkville with the Big Rock, which caused quite a stir in Toronto at the time. And now I continue to be impressed as she focuses her considerable energy and influence on the urgent need for climate action, an issue all landscape architects have a major role in addressing. Martha Schwartz is a landscape architect and artist with major interests in cities, communities, and the urban landscape. Her work spans many scales, from the site-specific art installations to working with cities at strategic planning levels. Martha is an advocate for how cities can help to reduce climate change and support a more sustainable approach to diminishing resources. She strongly believes that sustainability is created through design and the creation of identity and a sense of place as our landscapes help to differentiate ourselves in an ever-growing uniformity of place as a result of globalization. As founder and senior partner of Martha Schwartz Partners, she has over 35 years of experience as a landscape architect, urbanist, and artist on a wide variety of projects located around the world. She is a tenured professor in the practice of landscape architecture at Harvard University Graduate School of Design and an active member of the Landscape Architecture Foundation Climate Change Task Force. She is the recipient of numerous awards and prizes, including the Cooper Hewitt National Design Award, a Council of Fellows Award by the American Society of Landscape Architects, an honorary fellowship from the Royal Institute of British Architects. There is much more, but you can read about that in her bio on the web. In Canada, we are very proud to say she is also a member of the CSLA, as she joined APALA, which is the Atlantic Provinces Association of Landscape Architects, last year. Most recently, Martha has been teaching and lecturing to create a fuller understanding of the climate crisis and how landscape architects and other practitioners of the built environment can better address the risks we are facing, and to create awareness of the many possible solutions being developed in science, including geoengineering, which we may be able to integrate into our practice to help cities adapt and mitigate the risks of our changing climate. Please welcome Martha Schwartz.
Hello. And thank you for inviting me to this group. It is really an honor to be here, and I would say that my good friend Colleen Mercer Clark, who I'm sure you all know, suggested that I talk about the trajectory of my career. And I thought this would be easy peasy, but looking backwards has actually made me very anxious about myself. It kind of scared me. So if I don't really give you anything to think about, if it's of zero value to you, I would say that we can blame Colleen for it. And in short, I will blame her also for asking me to do this. So the good news is we can all blame Colleen. I think that's something that is a plus. Okay, here we go. My mom, who is in the pink circle, Stella Wasserman, and my father, Milton Schwartz, who is the arrows pointing to the upper right, both came from families of designers. I mean, in the old world from Europe, my grandparents came over and their parents were all tailors. Everybody was a tailor. They were making things because Jews weren't allowed to actually go to school, have professions or anything like that. But in any case, when their grandchildren were able to be Americans and be able to get to school, they all became architects. And my dad met Eugene Wasserman, who is on the left-hand side of my mom and her brother. They met while they were teaching at the University of Pennsylvania with Louis Kahn, who's one of the greatest modernist architects in the whole world. Actually, he came from the same family in a place where my father came from in Romania, go figure. Anyway, they met together and Eugene had a very cute younger sister who he introduced to my father, and they got married, and then they had 4 girls. So I'm one of those girls. But the problem is that we have a genetic defect where everybody has come out like with as designers or artists and we're hoping to actually marry into other genome groups so we can kind of stop. But I was always doing and making art since I was a little girl. And I went to art school at the Philadelphia Museum of Art when I was a kid, and I majored in art at high school, and I went to the University of Michigan and double majored in art and pre-med because I always loved biology. And towards the end of art school, I fell in love with the earthworks artists such as Robert Smithson, Richard Long, Michael Heiser, Nancy Holt, Walter Di Maria, and Christo. I thought they were the best. So I told my dad, the architect, he had a large practice in Philadelphia. I grew up on his floors. And I told him that I was going into landscape architecture. And as a successful architect, because I knew the hierarchy of architects and everybody who lived underneath architects, he gave me some important advice, which is any idiot can plant a tree. So I ignored him and just kept on going. So I'll give you a quick overview of my strategy to build my own practice. And as I have said, is that do not try this alone and at home or with your children. So here I am. This is a very kind of neat map about how I evolved my practice. And the beginning rules of my practice, it started in 1983 at number 1 in Boston, that my practice was going to only work with patrons and not clients. And we can talk about that later, but I can say actually, and in seriousness, that's kind of how our practice actually does work. We do design, but really people come to us when they see the design work that we do and decide they want to work with us. So I started in number 1 in Martha Schwartz Inc. in Boston in 1983 when I had my first baby. And then I moved to New York City, started my office, number 2, and had baby 2. And then in 1987, I moved to San Francisco and restarted my office for the 3rd time. Not a 3rd baby. In 1992, I moved back to Cambridge and restarted office number 4 and had baby 3. And in 2004, I moved to London, started off with office number 5. And in 2016, I moved back to New York in 2016 and started all over again in the United States. That was very clever, right? Okay, not. Anyway, we do have offices in New York, which is the newest office, London, which is the biggest office, and Shanghai. So that's where we are. I would suggest not doing what I did. So I wish I had time to show you some of our projects, but I will show you the first project I did after graduating grad school. It's the Bagel Garden. Not my best work, but probably my most important contribution to the profession. So it came about because my then husband, Peter Walker, and I couldn't agree on how to design our front yard in Back Bay, Boston. It's about 12 feet by 12 feet. And what I did is when he went off for a business trip, I went into action and built this little garden out of materials that I could buy only on our block, meaning purple aquarium gravel and bagels, which I dried and lacquered. And I actually took pictures and sent it to the ASLA magazine, and Grady Clay was the editor, decided to put it on the front cover. He asked me to write about why bagels. And in those times, landscape architecture was very white, very male, very corporate, and from an art student's point of view, extremely boring. And being appropriate, which is like waving a red flag in front of artists, was very important as we were trying to win favor from the architects, which we still don't have. So I made the case for bagels being extremely appropriate as a landscape material. It's inexpensive, everyone can do it, it does well in the shade, it doesn't need water, it's biodegradable. What material could be more appropriate than a bagel? And when it was published, there was a severe reaction, pro and con, and more people wrote into the magazine in debate about this than at any other time. And unfortunately, a number of people actually discontinued the magazine. They didn't want to be associated with it, with bagels on front of it. And Grady was fired eventually. So looking back, it did turn the corner of design and opened up the possibilities that landscape architecture could be an art form defined by the designer and included in other design arts. So here is really the root of that, which is the Dada piece by Duchamp. And I knew about Dada very well. I do love that group of artists. And this toilet was anonymously submitted as a work of art to the Society of Independent Artists Salon in 1917. It was immediately rejected and became instantly famous. The piece questioned whether an artist must make an object in order for it to be considered art, or whether choosing it and calling it art could be enough, thereby significantly altering the role of the artist. This changed the art world forever in terms of perception of what art could be. And this is what the Bagel Garden actually did for landscape architecture. So I am very proud of it. I'll probably have a bagel on top of my grave someday. So this is where this is about me stopping being a landscape architect in 2016. I just dropped being a landscape architect and I went into a different direction. My sister Maggie sent me a YouTube video about the melting of permafrost on the eastern Siberian Arctic shelf. And this begins my pivot, better described as my total freakout from designing landscape as art to facing a looming existential crisis, which I'm still experiencing. I gave it a think that day and then decided that what I was doing as a designer was completely irrelevant. So I was really heartbroken about learning about climate change. I called up Professor Peter Waters from Cambridge University, because I was in London, who is a renowned Arctic expert, and explained how the warming of the Arctic Ocean was melting the permafrost on the eastern Siberian Arctic shelf, which is starting to release methane, a greenhouse gas that is about 30 times the strength of carbon dioxide in terms of trapping heat. So, as you know, I'm sure you all know about permafrost. It covers about 24% of the exposed landmass of the northern hemisphere, and then trapped inside the Arctic permafrost are huge amounts of carbon and methane, about twice as much as the amount currently in the atmosphere. But this was what really scared me when I read this map here, and this is a killer graph illustrating the negative feedback loops that the release of methane will create, where rapid global heating will increase the ice melt and the spiraling methane release, which will add about 0.6 degrees to global warming by 2040. It is now projected there will be a loss of the Arctic summer ice, which will ensure maximum methane release from the exposed shallow seas of the continental shelf. So this has never gotten away, it's just gotten worse. So for me, this was extremely distressing. I decided that I was going to apply my time to learning about climate change, because I really did want to feel as though I could somehow intercede or, try to really help what was going on. So I was and still am very distraught about delivering such a world to my 3 children. And it's the world that I created and helped to make. So I just have these wonderful children, and it's hard for me to really imagine, after having learned about it, kind of what I'm leaving them. So I started a deep dive learning about climate change by reading lots of very readable, wonderful books by very good climate writers. Fortunately, there are good books that people like myself or yourselves who are not scientists can actually understand, and they're very well written. So I am a real solutions-oriented person because, I've had this office for 40 years. Everybody comes to me with problems. So I have to be able to say, okay, well, what are the solutions? And I came across these 2 books that opened up the topic of geoengineering the planet. So The Planet Remade, which is a fantastic book by Oliver Morton, and then Geoengineering, The Case for Engineering by David Keith, who actually is probably the top scientist on the topic of geoengineering. So what happened after I quit landscape architecture was the new landscape declaration from the Landscape Architecture Foundation. So on the eve of its 50th anniversary, the Landscape Architecture Foundation asked a diverse group of the world's leading landscape architects to reflect on the last half century and present bold ideas for what the discipline should achieve in the future. And I gave a 10-minute lecture on the urgency of climate change, and that the landscape architect should be the profession that takes the lead in this battle, being the professed stewards of the land. We have to become the stewards of the earth now. And we need to bump up our thinking and ambition and scale, move across silos, and tackle it head on. This became a key takeaway from the summit, and I believe this is the first step forward on tackling climate change taken by our important national landscape organizations, as the LAF immediately put together a working group on climate change, which of course I was part of, and that is what really started us off. A key product from the summit and a synthesis of the ideas is the new landscape declaration that was prepared in 2016. So in 2017, I got an email from a woman named Pamela Conrad, who I didn't know, asking if I would join her to give a lecture at the ASLA meeting in Los Angeles about climate change, because she knew I was kind of interested in climate change. And I said, absolutely yes. We were probably the first to really dive into the topic of climate change and climate change solutions within the ASLA. I have to say that when I did make this declaration, I knew I had to actually address it as part of an organization, not a singular person. And when I asked the ASLA whether they would actually take this on, I was told that the constituency doesn't like the words climate change. If you can believe that, it's true. And then I went to Barbara at the LAF and she said, fine, let's do it. So that is really how powerful these organizations can be in terms of making change. Anyway, we introduced the book Drawdown by Paul Hawken. I'm sure you guys have all read it. It's our go-to book in our offices, and I make all my students buy it. But just in case you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend it. It's about 70 scientists researching 80 solutions that we can do now that can draw down carbon dioxide and by 2050 solve the climate change problem. And my takeaway is that, was that the 15 most powerful solutions to climate change, 7 of them are nature-based solutions. And it was the first time I really understood how effective and important the landscape was, because they produced metrics and how much gigatons we can draw down. But the production of metrics was so important in regenerating, and it's fundamental that we actually support, rebuild for our land for biodiversity. And that's something that it took me a while to really figure out, I have to say. So the next year, we pulled together a panel of speakers about our approaches to climate change. And here is when I met Colleen Clark, Mercer Clark, who you all know, and I do too, fortunately, and Vanya Rinner, who is now the past president of the American Society of Landscape Architects, and also with, of course, Pamela. And what we did is we put together a panel to talk about the benefits of collaborative efforts, which really helps us to have a greater impact by expanding access to knowledge, contribute and connect to global networks, maximize our strength in numbers, elevate our profile and contributions as professions, and support a low carbon economy through our work. And this is us. This is what I call our girls group. And actually, we have been collaborating and talking to each other since that time. And I love this group. We have met, we started meeting, I think something like once a month, maybe once every 2 weeks at first. And we really came together as a group, giving each other support while working on climate change, which actually is not only daunting, but it's kind of depressing. And, you know, it's like pushing rocks uphill. And having support from a group of like-minded people, like our girl group, has been a wonderful experience for me. And we have definitely helped each other in giving support as well as great ideas. And it's now turned into this churning powerhouse. As with the last 4 years, we've made huge steps and have gathered momentum. And I highly recommend to all of you to reach outside your comfort zone, find other people who are, you know, who have interests that are the same as yours, and start talking to them. And in this day and age, it really does take a village to make things happen. And I really thank all of them here. It's really been great. So we did come together as a group, and I'm just giving you a few of the initiatives that we've actually worked on. And as I said, it's been a great, great honor to be part of this group. So we're on the initiatives. The first one I know that we're working on right now is both Colleen and myself and Vaughn. We're all helping to spearhead Pamela is spearheading a landscape architecture declaration for COP26 through the Organization of Architecture 2030. And the rest of us girls are really giving her support and, you know, trying to help with what she has on her plate. And Colleen is positioning IFLA to also give a declaration at COP26. And we're all pitching to help that too. We all just kind of dig in and help. And of course, she's at the helm of IFLA along with James Hayter, and they are creating very, very strong ties to the UN organizations, such as the UN Convention on Biological Diversity. I mean, she and James are really positioning landscape architecture as a very important go-to boots on the ground source for what we need to do to attack climate change. And then through my own participation in the CEO Roundtable in the US, and this is a group of CEOs from the so-called most important offices or practices within the United States, where we have some push to be able to kind of give support. And we were able to help push the ASLA to rejoin IFLA, which IFLA needed. So that was very good. And Colleen came down and she spoke to them. And, you know, we really kind of were able to move that forward. And then I would say presently, I am trying to activate EU landscape architects to protest the underrepresentation of landscape architects within the new EU Bauhaus organization. So I'm basically busy causing them problems because, you know, that sounds a lot like the old Bauhaus, not a new Bauhaus. So I've also started a nonprofit called Mayday Earth, and the vision is climate security for future generations. And then its purpose is to inform the public through a variety of communications platforms about climate change and the climate interventions and nature-based solutions that will be needed in order to rebuild and preserve our future. So we're presently building our website, but over the last few years, it's turned out I've given over 44 lectures, most of them in the last 2 years, all over the world, to different places all over the world. And I always research what's going to be happening to specific regions before I really talk about, you know, what the effects of climate change are and what the possible solutions are. So the other pieces of activism that I've been working on is trying to move the GSD forward, the Graduate School of Design, because it turns out that sometimes academia can move extremely and painfully slowly. And I'm not an academic, I'm a professor of practice there. So I'm like banging on things like, why are we not doing a course on climate change at this point in time? And anyway, so I've managed to be able to push for that. The inclusion of mitigation into our curriculum, it was only adaptation and resilience was being taught as landscape architects. And I'm like, no. We need to really kind of get into mitigation, decarbonization. That's what we do. We have to understand and learn about that. So also, teaching studios based on climate change and nature-based solutions to make cities climate ready. Edith Katz and myself, my Think Buddy, we work together. We've been going around different small cities within Massachusetts and working on them, again, with somebody from a wonderful man from the Energy and Environment Department within the state of Massachusetts, really figuring out how to make these cities more resilient and adapt. Then finally, I'll be working on the Harvard Climate Change Solution Research Grant on linear afforestation. So I got a grant to actually figure out what we can do with space inside of cities where we can actually plant linear skinny forests, but they're all connected and can provide a lot of benefits, especially like urban heat island effect and equity. So what I did do is I wasn't getting any traction with the faculty, so I got a bunch of students from GSD, and we printed out, like, we were supposed to have 10. You can only have 10 of these posters, so we printed out 100, and then we put them all over the school. We're talking about in really weird places, like when you go in the bathroom, it's in the toilet stall, or when you're going to eat lunch, it's on the garbage can, it's up everywhere, it's in the stairs, it's under on the floor. We just postered the whole place. And the outcome of the lecture was the establishment of the first required climate change course in the GSD, and built by the landscape architecture department. I forgot to say, I did give a lecture. I was afraid, I wanted people to come to the lecture, and I was afraid nobody was going to be there, maybe 5 people. And when I got there, it was packed full of students, 3 layers of standing room only. And they were they really asked, why are we not doing this? And I said, well, I don't know. I don't know. But the dean and the chair of the department were in the audience, and I suggested the students to ask them. So actually, now we have it. This is the introduction to it. And I have to say, it's required course. And I have to say, it was from the landscape architecture department. And so far, the other departments haven't done that. So the first part of it is everybody can come and listen to, because it's about the background and science of climate change. But the solutions are strictly landscape architecture solutions, because our solutions and what we do is completely different than what architects do. So, we're past the amenity bit about landscape architecture. We're past, working for architects. We really are the go-to profession for climate change. And then here, this other one that we did, Edith and I, was because I've been reading up on geoengineering. I was so excited about it. I know everybody hates it, but I thought it was really interesting. And we mounted a program called the Designer's Geoengineering Toolkit for Mitigation, because nothing was being taught in mitigation. And with the intention of teaching a bit of climate science about the larger scale solutions that are coming out of science now that we can learn with and we can integrate into the design process. And I say we can because I already have been doing that. So the intent of the course was to jump in scale from ecological scale to Earth system scale, which I believe is necessary for our profession to learn in order to expand itself. And while we are more familiar with ecology and ecosystems, most of us don't know about Earth systems. I certainly did not, and Earth science. So it was an intro to a larger scale systems that are part of the climate discourse, so we could better participate in the discourse and understand what the scientists were saying. So let's go to climate intervention, or it's also called geoengineering, and it focuses on addressing global warming by cooling the Earth and removing atmospheric carbon dioxide, both of which, in my opinion, we are going to need. So this is boring stuff, but let's look at our taxonomy chart. There are two major categories and then a lot of subcategories of climate interventions and technologies, which are carbon dioxide removal, that's one arm of it, the blue, and the solar radiation management, which is the pink, which it cools the earth. And in our discourse, we studied each of these methods that were very interesting, and many of them, as I said, can be integrated into practice, even cooling the earth. And I have already integrated a lot, as I said, in our own projects, which I won't have time to show you guys, but it would be nice if someday I could. So let's go to solar radiation management, technologies that cool the earth by reflecting sunlight back into space. But they pose many risks, challenges, and uncertainties. However, there is a building scientific consensus that we will need such methods to cool down the earth due to many reasons. So scientific consensus says that no amount of adaptation or resilient planning can lead us to a stable, secure climate future, which is just because we haven't done enough to address it. Now, this is something that a lot of people don't quite understand, and the IPCC doesn't put it out in front of people, or they don't really mention this issue. A lot of people believe that cutting down emissions is going to stop climate change. But the question is, what is the relationship between the carbon cycle and the energy cycle? And the question I would ask you, I wish I could see your hands, is that even if we stop emitting today, would the Earth be able to cool down? And the answer to that is a resounding no, no way. It's not going to cool down. It's going to continue to heat up. And it will continue to rise for another 40 to 50 years. So we have to expect the heat to continue to heat up over a long, long time in human time. So according to this research paper, crossing into a hothouse Earth period would see a higher global temperature than at any time in the past 1.2 million years. And the climate might stabilize with 4 to 5 degrees of warming by the end of the century, and the seas could be 30 to 100 feet high. Parts of the Earth would be uninhabitable. And one of the reasons, and I have to say, I just recently came across this one, the whole scientific community was buzzing on this one. One of the reasons is called committed warming, as to why we're going to continue to have heat into our atmosphere, which affects the energy cycle and is caused by the absorption of heat from the sun by the Earth's soils, rocks, and the oceans. And natural cycles of the Earth takes time. They don't move in human time. It takes about 40 years or 50 years, a little bit longer, embedded and committed warming to escape from the soils and the oceans back into the atmosphere, which will add more heat. And according to this article, we have to add 1.4 degrees centigrade to account for the embedded warming on top of the IPCC predictions of 1.5 to 2.0, which gives us a 2.9 to a 3.4 degrees by 2050. And that's more realistic in terms of what we're headed for. We're definitely not going to be making our target. This one is a data visualization I always love by Richard Weller, who is the chairman of the landscape department at the University of Pennsylvania. And it's showing this giant Mount Carbon, which is 52.5 meters high. And Everest is at the very bottom. So it takes about 10 Everests to show how much carbon dioxide is in our atmosphere. And without removing it, the Earth will retain its heat. And so that's another reason why we are not going to be able to feel much in terms of relief of global warming. So David Keith, the Harvard physicist and environmentalist, writes that, quote, carbon casts a long shadow into the future. 1,000 years after we stop pumping carbon into the air, the warming will still be about half as large as it was on the day we stopped. So carbon just sits there in the atmosphere, and that's why we're going to need direct air capture and geoengineering to do that. And there are four things we need to do to avert the worst of climate change. And this is all in our little books of to do. We have to stop emissions. We have to draw down atmospheric carbon dioxide through direct air capture. We have to regenerate the Earth and its natural systems. That's our bailiwick. And then we're going to have to cool the Earth because almost all the effects of climate change are caused by global warming. And I want to say that this is something that landscape architects can directly affect, is global warming. And the fact that this is not put out as something that we need to be thinking about, or that nobody quite gets, that, okay, we can stop emissions, but now what are we going to do with the rising heat? It would be better if we got started now to deal with it, because landscape architecture can do this. So policy must assure our next generation's future, like my kids, your kids, our kids, their kids. We must look at options that can not only reduce emissions, but to counteract the effects of global warming. Why can't the IPCC say that? I'm upset with the IPCC, obviously. But this is a very important piece of climate change discourse, which you probably haven't heard about, complaining about, well, why aren't we talking about global warming? It's because, yeah, I don't know. It just occurred to me that what about it? And this is something that is very, very important to us. And it's an important climate change issue that only landscape architects can fix through addition of greening cities and planting as many trees as possible and not overturning earth and putting ground covers and everything we do. So after that, I'm going to take you to the other side of geoengineering, which is cooling Earth. I'm going to introduce you to stratospheric aerosol intervention, or I'm going to just call it SAI, which is a proposal that scientists have been working on since the 1940s, knowing that this was going to happen, to cool the Earth by reflecting a small percentage of inbound sunlight back to outer space in order to reduce global warming. In other words, they're increasing the albedo of the atmosphere. And the idea came from measurements from volcanic eruptions that cooled down the Earth, like when Pinatubo shot off in 1992. And this idea is about mimicking volcanoes. It has impressive results, which prove to be sufficient to entirely offset global warming. It's received the most sustained attention and also is the most controversial solution in the book. And although this type of intervention is not fully tested, that's a problem. We aren't allowed to test this, and the effects are uncertain. Most scientists consider we're going to have to employ it if we're going to avoid the worst case scenarios, of climate change. So SAI could reduce the effects of global warming and its associated risks effectively, globally, rapidly, reversibly, and inexpensively. It also seems to be technologically feasible. It's not a difficult technology. However, as I said before, it could pose serious physical risks, social challenges. The social challenges are more difficult to deal with than the actual scientific challenges, and that it needs to be researched and it needs to be studied so that we can address these challenges before we really need to use it. We cannot use this now. It's not feasible now. But if things really go belly up, which looks like it will be, given the fact that the global community has not actually acted as it needed to act to avoid climate catastrophe, it may be something that we're going to have to use. And the other thing is that other countries can use it too. So it would be better for us to understand what the dynamics are of doing this, because if other countries use it and use it poorly, we need to know exactly how we can deal with that. So it's also a truism that we need to embrace adaptation and mitigation options that can help to address climate change. But no single option at this point is sufficient by itself. In other words, stopping emissions is not sufficient by itself, as I explained. We have to go to all bases to really figure out how this is going to work. And this is a truism that we all need to embrace. We need to really be open to different ideas, because things are going to have to take a radical turn to be able to kind of to disable the amount of warming that is going to happen. So through learning about how the Earth works and the Earth systems and the large-scale solutions that are being proposed, I actually started my journey back to landscape architecture. I was completely shocked at my U-turn and came to understand how important our profession really is. And for me, not in the area of art and culture, in the area of, saving our children. So I'm going to this taxonomy chart again. And if you take a look at this, it's under carbon dioxide removal. That's that one branch out of two branches. But underneath carbon dioxide removal is natural carbon dioxide removal. And this is a section that is our wheelhouse. This is where we, as landscape architecture, can learn about what we can do in ways that we can't learn through ecology. And we spent a lot of time on this as landscape architects because we're not farmers, but what is regenerative agriculture? They're methods that we understand now to how to really rebuild our soils. And all of these things actually pertain to us. So you may be wondering why natural carbon dioxide is under the umbrella of geoengineering, and the answer is pretty simple, that geoengineering nature-based solutions must be done at a scale that would actually modify the Earth's systems. It's all about the scale. However, as with any of our projects where we use plants and ground covers, we are contributing to the fight against climate change. And added up all together, we can make a huge contribution by mitigating the effects of climate change through our designs and our planning. And we naturally provide solutions and are now in the process of being the go-to profession. This is really happening now because why? We're the green profession. So I'm getting to the end of this, and I just saw this a few days ago, and I was really, wow, this is a great example of how people can work together. The Nature-Based Solutions Initiative, this is what it's called, based in Cambridge, UK, has grown a group of 55 UK-based universities and research centers working together to raise ambition for tangible outcomes from the UN COP26. So our profession is really alive, trying to get our foot in the door and create some kind of noticeability, which evidently the EU Bauhaus just missed completely. So it's the COP26 Universities Network has published a briefing paper on nature-based solutions to which I'm going to call it NBS members contributed. So they rounded up a lot of universities in the UK. So the core of the mission is to enhance understanding of the potential of nature-based solutions, and that this is the COP declaration. To date, I'm sure it's going to continue to evolve, but they keep posting it, based on nature-based solutions. And it is based on 4 important guidelines. And I won't have time to read the guidelines, but it's an interesting website to take a look at. The 4 nature-based guidelines are headlighted as crucial for nature-based solutions programs to deliver their promised benefits. Now, I would love to see what those benefits are in metrics. I'm going to go in there and take a look. The report concludes with policy recommendations for delivering NBS for climate, biodiversity, and human well-being within the UK. The types of economic incentives that can be used, how to monitor NBS appropriately, and how to effectively involve local stakeholders through a use of participatory approach. So the most heartening piece of this is that of action that has been taken and done by a group of universities who came up with the idea of well, why don't we collaborate? And this is a great example of activism and working together with like-minded people who are all rowing in the same boat in order to accelerate our mission. And it's a footprint we should follow, I think. Why don't we combine our best universities in North America to do the same? We can if we want. And throughout our evolution, communities that grow around a common goal become stronger and prevail. This is just in Darwinism. You have to have groups in order to prevail. And we can't accomplish our goals as individuals. We must put ourselves out there to either lead or assist leadership and leadership groups. And combined with the necessary cuts in emissions across the sectors, nature-based solutions can substantially reduce the peak temperatures reach the century. So this was kind of, yes, Martha, you're right. Landscape architecture and what we do can actually affect global warming. So I thought, yeah, I'm glad. So in conclusion, I just want to kind of put up before you what our core strengths are as landscape architects, because sometimes we forget it or we don't even think about it. But we are the decarbonizing profession. We can be playing a much larger role as the globe heats up. We are the only profession that works with living systems and are steeped in the science of biology, ecology, and maybe even earth systems. So the profession is as expansive in its coverage as the landscape is itself. As generalists, we are the conductors of people and groups and we orchestrate the specialists. We need to know a lot about a lot. It's our job to see the big picture, and the world needs generalists like us who can piece together the chatter so that we can define strategies that will solve important problems. And we bring together specialists in order to learn specifics, but it's people like us who put the disparate pieces together in a coherent and executable reality. So we're creatives. Sometimes that brings us problems, but it means that we have agile minds that can put unlikely ideas together to create something that hasn't been imagined before. And we can imagine things that do not exist now, such as the future. We can think outside the box, and this is one of the most important skill sets. And the future depends on people's creativities. So get creative. And then we're integrated thinkers. So we are the only profession that are knowledgeable about ecology, society, culture, visual communications, and creativity, and we know how to build things. We've been taught to integrate these disparate silos of knowledge and produce solutions. We are taught to think horizontally and to bring together such disparate disciplines such as science and art, go figure, and imagine the future. We've been trained to think at a global scale, a regional scale, down to an intimate garden scale. This is an invaluable skill set. No matter how large a master plan may be, one must consider the experience of a single person as they're walking in the environments that they have been planned. There is no other profession that has this range of scalar training, and this will be extremely valuable in the future. And I guarantee you, we will use it as we deal with larger issues in the landscape. And our ability to communicate verbally can convince people that what we are proposing is worthwhile and will help them to solve their issues. And if we were not able to verbally communicate, we would not have a profession, as we must convince people to support our ideas. Since it's their football, we are spending other people's money and have no power other than our credibility and power of persuasion. And through our ability to draw and visualize, we can convey spatial ideas, moods, nuances of a particular environment. A picture can and does say 1,000 words. And we can create what the future looks like through design and visualization. And this is incredibly a power tool as well to help people feel comfortable with new ideas and the possible solutions we are putting before them to address their issues and climate change. And we are also storytellers, and through our ability to communicate verbally and work with others to understand others and to integrate their input into our thinking and design is a crucial part of who we are. We integrate many, many complex components when designing landscapes, especially within the public realm. And in order to do this, our education is broad, and we also work across professional silos, often within the range of engineers in many sectors, such as civil, transport, electrical, structural, environmental, but botanists, hydrologists, geologists, it goes on and on, the people that we work with, and still come up with a solution of beauty that can reach the hearts and minds of communities and people. And we make an emotional connection that people will value and add beauty to the urban environment, which, as we know, is fundamental to the quality of life and human health. So now is our time as landscape architects to go beyond our remit. We need to expand our minds, find new friends, come up with ideas for participation in saving the world, and have the satisfaction that we are making a contribution. Even as an individual, you can plant a garden, even plant bamboo, even if they're not indigenous. So the question is, where will you be in 2050? And how are you going to participate in this in any way you can? And the best way to start is figure out what you're really good at. What are those things that I mentioned that you're actually crackerjack at? And use that as a platform for moving forward. So welcome to the Anthropocene, and one, if not the most transformational eras in the history of humanity. So thank you all so very much. And I wanted to thank you very much for allowing me to interface with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martha, for such an inspiring and thought-provoking presentation. My name is Michelle Legault. I'm the CSLA and the LACF Executive Director, and I'll be moderating today's Q&A session. First, I want to thank ABC Recreation for supporting Martha's keynote address. We have lots of questions and 50 minutes to do it in before we give everybody a short break leading into the educational sessions. So Martha, the most popular question that everybody wants to know is, what is the best way we can help in our role of landscape architects with the challenge of climate change? Where can we be most effective?
Well, I'm really glad people are asking that question, because that's the first question that you have to ask yourself if you feel that you want to be involved. But I'll have to tell you my own story. I was really grappling with it myself. I had to figure out what it was that I was able to do, because it seemed so remote, untouchable in terms of entering into it. But number one is you have to really look at yourself and figure out what you like to do and what you are good at. And I said that because you want to start off with something that you feel comfortable with and something that you like doing and you feel like you can do it well. And, I've been teaching for so long and having to make presentations. And then I figured, well, you know what? I can communicate out. That's probably maybe the only thing I can do to help. And what I found out through reading these books is that scientists totally suck in terms of their communications. I mean, this was just going through a period of reading about it and reading news about it, and actually reading the book. It's called Losing Earth. I read about that. It's a little book, but it came out in the New York Times. And what happened was it was kind of catastrophic, but the scientists were not able to deliver their message in a way that had impact. And you know what? The scientists, that's not their job. That's not what they're good at. But other people could be good at that. And I'm good at that. So for me to unpack what scientists are saying so people can understand it, that's my job. That I kind of went into without knowing what to do at first. But that one, you'll find that these things, when you read them, it picks up your interest, and you can just call them up. Tell them you want to help. I mean, you have to kind of throw yourself into the water, not knowing what you're going to get. You have to be kind of forward or even brave to find people who are doing it, knock at their doors, and just start. Nobody's going to come to you. You're going to have to go to them. So figure out what you like to do. I would say broaden your scope. I do have a good reading list. I didn't put it up, but if you would like that, I can definitely hand it over to Michelle. And they're very good books to read. We can all get it. But within those books, there's lots and lots of really interesting topics. And you'll find something that you're really interested in. You will. So that's my advice, is just kind of read up, figure out what you can do, and then go call them up. That's my
the importance of good communication and knocking on doors. The next question we have is, how do we get more landscape architects in positions of senior decision-making in governments?
Well, again, we're always frustrated about how nice we are as a group, and we are. I believe that we can definitely wheedle ourselves up into higher positions within our government, and that's exactly what Colleen is doing. That's a good question to Colleen, because she's already done that. But we have actually, what we did with our CEO roundtable, we have been able to exert our constituents, who are people who work in our office. There are a lot of them within the U.S., and put pressure in areas and kind of get up. Within the ASLA, there's a time where we can go up to the Capitol and actually state our case. But I've also met landscape architects who are like the mayor of Copenhagen. It's people who are really interested in policy. That is its own topic. And you can really, I think, engage by learning what the steps are and who is doing what, and starting to get involved into those organizations, probably by giving your time to that. I don't have a clear idea about exactly how you do it, but I know we're needing it, and I think we can do it. Other people have done it. So it's like, how, find out what the organizations are where you live, find out what they're working on, and figure out, if you can start to participate. And everything you do is going to be from the bottom up. Everything, me too. Just not knowing anything, and then learning through actually participating. That's the way to do it.
Sounds like the important message there, Martha, is to encourage people to get involved. We have another question here. It seems to me that the success of the range of solutions you outlined is very dependent on urgent and fundamental changes on the political and economic fronts. Any thoughts on that matter?
Well, yes. It is very urgent. Things are very urgent. And politically, none of our countries have actually moved fast enough to be able to avoid what's coming our direction. So anything that we can do to really get into policy making and to integrate what we know is needed into policy is going to be very, very important. And again, that's what Colleen and IFLA are working at that level. And hopefully all the other, the constituency of IFLA, all the countries, move together and help each other to make that a prominent issue within policy making. But I think we are really growing stronger. We're growing together. We're creating more momentum. I think what we're doing has been fantastic. We all are starting to stand up to be activists. That's the deal, I guess. We have to activist. We have to action ourselves in doing whatever we can to support others, so that we get up to the impacting of policy making, because it has to go so quickly now.
We have another question here, which is going to challenge you a little. It says, let's stick to protecting soil and trees and ecosystems at all latitudes. Geoengineering is so anthropocentric. The planet will recover without humans.
Well, I would have to agree with that, because the planet definitely will recover without us. Absolutely. The planet will keep on rolling. Evolution will keep on rolling. The only problem is that humankind is going to really suffer, and the biodiversity is not going to stay diverse, not in the trajectory that we're going to. So the issue with our nature-based solutions, number one, is that we have to have them. We have to get that started. But nature-based solutions do take time. And if you take a look at the other trajectories within the Earth systems, things are going much more quickly than what the nature-based solutions can actually handle in terms of both emissions and heat. So look, we have geoengineered the Earth already. That isn't something we haven't done. We've done it, and we've geoengineered it to this point. So actually, it's reverse engineering that needs to be done. And at this point, that is the only thing that we have on the table, because if we were to grow 1 trillion trees, the rate of warming would far outstrip what the trees could do. And that's just science. Now, I think that this is a really good question, and it's a really good topic, and that is the debate about solar geoengineering. People are very much against it because it's tampering with the whole climate, but we are doing that now, today. We're tampering with the climate by driving our cars, by heating our houses, by everything we're doing it. So, and that is, yeah, there are things that human beings built, but this particular idea is really the only thing we have to actually save billions of people. And in order to make that decision, you really have to know what the benefits and the risks really are. For example, what is happening now is snowmelt all over the world. And if you just get out of North America, because actually we caused the problem, most of the people in the global South are going to be challenged and hurt by global warming, much more so than we, at least now. And they haven't done it. We have. We are responsible for what we've done. That's certainly a stance I take. And we have to actually think carefully before we say, no, we're not going to cool the earth. You guys are just going to be without water. Your children will die. You won't have any, it's like telling them that they cannot have any hope at all. And you have to be willing to say, yeah, that's okay. You guys just are going to suffer. And just to let you know, and to think about it, is that the Himalayas, all the glaciers are melting. And the Himalayas is the source for all the water for Southeast Asia and Pakistan. And all the rivers that come from the Himalayas, like the Indus and the Brahmaputra and the Ganges and the Mekong, there are over 2 billion people depending on that water, and that water isn't going to last because it's melting. So if you're okay with that, then you could, no, we don't want to do that. But you have to really think about other people in other countries and how they are going and are now suffering, and they are. People don't live like we do. If you take a look, in order to live our lives, we would need 4 Earths. So we're very privileged. We're very lucky. So lucky, I can't believe it. But making decisions for other people who are challenged by climate change that we caused, we have to be very careful about what we're saying, because we're saying these for other people around the world who are going to and are being hit now. Southern Africa, the Sahel in Africa, Southeast Asia, India, because the Chinese have appropriated the Himalayas, and China is going to have a problem with water and food. And there'd be social disruption and probably climate wars. Climate wars are happening now. We don't read about it because our press doesn't talk about anything else other than the United States, but it is happening. I keep up with this. So there is so much disruption, global disruption and inequity. And women are the ones who suffer the most, of course. You have to learn about this stuff before you make this kind of decision. And that's all I'm asking, is really kind of understand what other people are going through and will go through before we do. And we caused it.
Thank you so much, Martha. There's so many more questions. I think we could have you here for another hour, but we do need to stop for give everybody a short bio break before the technical portion begins. Again, want to thank you. thought-provoking, you're inspiring, and we love the way you discuss and challenge us. And so we hope that you will keep doing that. We want to thank again ABC Recreation for sponsoring this keynote address. We're going to give everybody a 10-minute break, and at 1:15, the concurrent sessions will begin. Alors tout le monde, un petit 10 minutes pour une petite pause café, et on va revenir à 13h15 pour les séances d'éducation qui sont tous énumérées dans l'horaire. So again, refer to your agenda. And everybody, though Martha can't see you, she can only see me right now, but I'd say if we could give her a virtual round of applause. Bravo, Martha, and thank you again for joining the CSLA OALA Congress.
Believe me, it was my honor. Really, thank you so much. And I think the CSLA is the best. I depend on you guys a lot more than I do the ASLA. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martha.